And I have to tell you that I'm really excited about today's show. This has been really 2 years in the making. I was sitting in a Starbucks up in the Bedminster, Burnersville area, and there was a magazine, and in it I read this article about this individual, and we'll talk to him in a bit. He's our special guest today. About this individual who was flying around the country, getting rescue dogs and bringing them back to various organizations that he works with in New Jersey. And I thought it was phenomenal. And the funny story is I reached out to him 2 years ago, but clearly I had the wrong email address. It was something that was way in the back, and literally 2 to 3 weeks ago, he reached out to me saying, "I'm awfully sorry, Mike. I know you reached out to me a couple years ago, but I am available, and I'm stoked about this." So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my special guest, Matthew Kiener. He is the founder of Flypups.org. So by the name itself, you can understand what's going on. And I've been dying to talk to him because I want to know his story. So thanks so much for being on the show, Matt. I really appreciate it.
Oh, Dr. Mike, thank you. It's my pleasure. I really appreciate finally getting to connect tonight.
Yeah, so why don't you tell our audience, like, how did all this begin? What is the story?
Like most good things, by accident, I guess. I was down at the airport just minding my own business. I got a phone call from a friend who said, "I committed to helping move some dogs and my plane's broke. Can you pick up these 5 dogs and bring them to New York State?" And at the time, I had this little 2-seater aerobatic plane, which was a whole lot of fun, but, I mean, tiny. And I said, "I can't pick up 5 dogs. You know what kind of plane I've got." No, they're puppies. They're puppies. And I said, "Oh, well, I can fit 5 puppies in a plane." So I did. This was a relay, this particular mission. So I was the third of 3 flights, and I was bringing the dogs up to New York State. A friend of mine, Sarah, came and helped out because I wanted to have somebody else in the plane, never having done this before, in case something's going on with the dogs. I wanted to be able to focus on the plane.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And we flew them up to New York. We got to the airport, and the office, the FBO, they call it. We let them run around for a little while with permission while we were sorting paperwork. And I took a run to pick up the paperwork from my plane, and the 5 puppies were playing with siblings, and I looked down just before opening the door, fortunately, because the one might have escaped, and she was at my feet, and I said, "Well, you think you're coming home with me?" And she started licking my face. Now, to backtrack a little bit and give you the background, these 5 puppies were about to be destroyed. They were in a kill shelter down in South Carolina, and they were going to be euthanized. They were taken by an advocate down there, and held for 2 weeks, and then we were transporting them after they got their health certificates. So fast forward, now we're up in New York State to a non-kill rescue that is going to take them and see to their adoptions and all that. And this one has clearly chosen me. And I'd never heard of any of this. I mean, I've been a pilot for years, and I love dogs. But I didn't realize that I could combine these two, and that the need was there. So this just was like one of those days. My head was spinning, and this cute little dog is sitting there. If you go to flypups.org, you'll see on missions completed, the bottom of the page, I'm in a pink shirt in the old plane, and there's Piper. She's got her paws up on the yoke, and she's flying on the way home. I named her Piper. I had a Cessna at the time, but again, my mind is just spinning. I knew I needed a bigger, faster, more capable airplane, and this was going to be somehow. And so I named her Piper with the idea that I'd upgrade to a Dakota or a Saratoga or something like that. And then every time I used her name for the next 6 months or so, it reminded me, kept me focused, and before you know it, I had the plane, and Flypups was born.
Wow, that's I love serendipity. I love how things just come together and so forth. So you create this organization, and how do you make the contacts? How do you find these places that are in need of puppies to come? I understand the concept. Let me backtrack. Is that I understand a lot of these shelters down south. It's interesting. One of my guests was an author, and she wrote a book about why places down south need the pets to come up to our area. That we have the resources, we have the finances to do a lot of low cost spay neuter. And yes, down there they don't, and I understand that concept. But how do you connect with these groups? Are these groups that they're just scrambling for individuals like yourself, or is there a networking of pilots and so forth?
Well, it's funny. When this all started to come together, and I started to formed Flypups and all that, I'm trying to figure out how is all this going to happen. And the question you just asked was certainly on my mind. But it's one of those things where they find you, and they find you quickly. And it's great in one respect, but it's also disheartening in others. There are so many that need. I just as I'm finishing a mission, I've got it seems two more lined up. This weekend, I'll be heading down to Mississippi to pick up 20 or so dogs and bring them back to New Jersey. And it's nonstop. So it's a small world, the network is there, and people find out about you, and word of mouth travels, and I get calls all the time, and some of them are a little less doable than others. People ask me, I'm based in New Jersey, so the plane is based in Jersey, and our operating area is generally east of the Mississippi, and then from Maine to Florida. It's very difficult. You don't like to say no, and you do get these calls, Matt, if you can't get here by Monday, the dogs will be euthanized.
Oh man, yeah.
And how do you sleep at night with that?
Right.
So you do your best, you try and make them all happen, and sometimes you get lucky. I had one mission, this was really cool. This guy in Florida, and it was the only time that I brought a dog south. Okay. They've all, as you said, they've all come north. Down south, there's a culture and a level of they're impoverished areas we're going to.
Absolutely, yep.
And the culture is just not to spay, neuter, not to contain your dog. So, but I got a phone call. There was a guy down in Florida. He wanted this dog that had been used for breeding and then dumped off at a shelter in Ohio brought to him. He said, look, it's only got a few years left. We have the means. We want to give it the best few years left it can possibly have. And it was a great, you tugged at your heart and you wanted to help. But at the same time, it's one dog. I'm flying from Jersey to Ohio and Ohio to Florida and then back to Jersey. I mean, that's going to cost a ton. And for one dog, it's just not a practical use of the limited resources we have. But I didn't want to say no. I said, let me see if I can come up with something. And then just serendipity. Okay, I made no phone calls. I get no credit for any of this. Within the next 36, 48 hours, I had the following phone calls. What ended up happening was I flew from New Jersey and I went to Maryland. Somebody called me wanting a dog from Maryland to go to Ohio. I flew that dog to Ohio. In Ohio, I picked up 4 dogs, 3 that were coming back to New Jersey. I'd gotten that phone call, and then that one that was ultimately going to go to Florida. So now I head down to Florida with that one dog. I pick up 17 that are going to Reading, Pennsylvania, stopping in Virginia to pick up one more that was going to end up in New Jersey. So there were a bunch of these one-offs, or 2 or 3, but little ones. But it all worked out. It was so cool. It was just one of those moments where you're like, okay, this is cool. This is the way it's supposed to go.
Oh, that's awesome. And so how many dogs can you take? What is your capacity?
Well, it's a small plane. It's a single-engine plane. It would seat. It's rated to seat 7 humans. Okay. And I've had 24 Chihuahuas on board. 23 of them slept. One the whole way. I've got noise-canceling headsets, but Bose could use some retuning for that particular frequency, I think. But I've had my absolute record is 40 dogs.
Wow.
No puppies, small dogs, but 40 on one flight.
And you said your very first flight you took someone. Do you always have someone with you, or have you been alone most of the time?
Almost always. Okay. But it's one of those things where it's nice. It's difficult. Like the trip to Mississippi, that's going to be an overnight. Okay. I'll be flying. I'll probably log about 5-6 hours flight time in each direction. And to do that there and back it's too much in one day, especially with all the, so, I'll fly down, I'll grab dinner, get a good night's sleep, and then I'll fly back the next day. And I'm bringing actually a friend, Steve. He's a founding board member, Steve Shapiro, and he's another pilot. So that's great. Sometimes I'll bring another pilot so I can switch off. Sometimes I'll bring press. A lot of times will want to come and take pictures and videos. Or sometimes it's just a friend or my parents or something like that. Depending upon the trip. But it's good to have another set of hands, so that one person can focus on the plane and one on the puppies if it ever became necessary.